So for our final speaker, and returning to us again at Agile on the Beach, because I've had the honor of introducing Daniel onto the stage a couple of times now, which is absolutely brilliant. So introducing Daniel Merriman, who is the product manager coach. From academia to product management, Daniel has partnered with organizations like Sony, Raspberry Pi Foundation. He now coaches aspiring product leaders to overcome obstacles whilst managing engineering at Citizens Advice. So please put your hands together, go crazy, and welcome Daniel to the stage.
Thank you so much, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up at the back? Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the warm welcome. I really am delighted to be with you all here today. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Dan. And as you can tell from the wonderfully kind introduction from Paul here, I am pathologically incapable of sticking with the same job title for more than 2 days in a row. I think that's quite a common problem for many of us here. It's honestly a little weird being on stage here this afternoon, and for more than one reason. At a personal level, this is my first public talk since catching COVID nearly 2 years ago and the really fun long COVID diagnosis that came soon afterwards. So, standing and talking on for long periods, it really takes it out of me. So I hope you'll forgive me for not taking questions at the end. Please do come and find me, though, afterwards, once I've had a chance to recover. But it also feels like the tech space in general, and product management in particular, is in a bit of a weird space right now. And I'm pretty sure it's not just me. The product communities that I hang out with, colleagues across the industry who I talk to, the clients that I work with, they're all reporting similar things. The job market feels weird. Partly it just doesn't seem like there are many vacancies right now, which perhaps shouldn't be surprising. Economics isn't my strong suit, I'll hold my hands up for that, but I know the situation is what the experts call far from ideal. Related to this is how competitive applications are for the vacancies which do exist, with enormously qualified applicants struggling to land roles that, on paper at least, they seem ideally suited for. Though again, maybe this makes a certain amount of sense, given how many of our colleagues have been impacted by layoffs over the last 12 months. There is a lot of talent in the market applying for these roles. But I think it's not just the sight of some of our strongest product people struggling to land new roles that's weirding me out. There's something about the roles themselves that feels a bit off to me. And at first I thought it was an allergic reaction to this sudden focus on AI and large language models and job requirements, which was causing this sense of unease. I mean, it's not like we haven't been here before with blockchain and crypto and the metaverse and the Internet of Things, with job roles demanding 10 years experience in technologies 6 months old. And overnight experts stoking the fires of FOMO with an endless litany of supposed benefits while conveniently overlooking the uncomfortable question, given humanity's, shall we say, mixed history with innovation and unforeseen consequences, will shoehorning AIs and LLMs into everything we make give us a future that we actually want? I think yesterday's keynote gave us a lot to think about there. This is definitely a source of unease for me, but again, it feels like only part of the picture. Product social media needs to be in this conversation. We've got this distressed job market. All the blockchain bros have rebranded their Substacks from Ethereum to ChatGPT. And not a day goes by on LinkedIn where empty platitudes and holy wars compete for our attention, where rise and grind humble brags about 5 a.m. gym sessions clash with the human centipede of #gratitude sunset photos, where MBA-wielding avatars share surefire frameworks of success copy-pasted from last month's Harvard Business Review. And men, it's always men, with worryingly responsible-sounding jobs pant breathlessly about how much better everything would be if Elon Musk were in charge. For all the good, smart, compassionate people sharing their experiences with us in product social media land, and there are lots of them, it is not a healthy environment. There is a conservatism about this environment, a narrowing of the spectrum, a nagging sense that if you don't fit this niche image of prototypical product godliness, if you don't have a deep domain knowledge in this flavor of the month techno trend, if you're not speaking to your customers every single day, if you've had the audacity to put a date on your roadmap or share an opinion on engineering decisions, or worst of all, dare to utter the word project, then you're a charlatan, a fraud, and you don't belong in our clubhouse. This, I think, is the source of my unease. Am I too technical or not technical enough? Am I too business focused or not business focused enough? Am I too focused on process or not focused on process enough? I thought I knew the answers to these questions until social media told me that there's only one true path to product righteousness, and to discover what that is, all I have to do is like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Because I'm a simple man. I don't think I'm unintelligent, and I have a certain amount of low cunning that can pass for political guile in a bad light. But when it comes to product management, my approach is, and always has been, disarmingly straightforward. My job is to make the product better in as sustainable a way as possible and try to enjoy myself as much as possible while I'm doing it. And this last point might feel slightly out of place, but for me, it's by far the most important because it is the bit that enables everything else. It's the fuel to the virtuous circle of successful product development. If I'm enjoying myself, if I'm comfortable in my surroundings, then everything else I'm trying to do feels so much more achievable. Now, it's all very well me being here with the Britney Spears microphone saying, things feel bad and I don't like it, which is an unkind summary, not worthy of you, though not a million miles away from the truth. But there is a message in all this. And it's that this extremely online version of product management, this highly opinionated yet somehow deeply formulaic version that I'm talking about here, it doesn't actually reflect the reality of any product role that I've ever worked. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist or that it's all bollocks, but I haven't ruled that out. A former colleague of mine, Connor Murphy, recently interviewed over 100 product leaders across all kinds of organizations, including these places like Google, which the internet would have us believe do things the way they should be done. And what he discovered in those interviews was that no matter what the organization's reputation for product excellence in the wider world, not one of his interviewees actually worked in accordance with these idealized frameworks in real life. Not one. And very few came anywhere close. There is a messiness to doing this job in the real world, which we actually just heard from Rachel, that it doesn't neatly mesh with the sanitized pseudo-wisdom of procedurally generated product content. And so I'd like to share a few examples with you today from one of the most transformative periods of my working life. Let me set the scene for you. It's January 2021, which is easy to believe with the weather as it is. I've just spent Christmas recovering from a role that started with so much promise, but by the end felt like a relentless series of disappointments. I was burnt out. I felt like I'd wasted the past 2 years of my life and that I might never find an organization where my desire to do good work would be appreciated and valued rather than dismissed as disruptive and contrarian. And it feels like the product manager's lot in life to be the dissenting voice, and I've never minded being the one to take that role, but it takes a certain kind of environment to truly nurture that sort of person. But now it was my first day at the new job, and though my past experiences had left me feeling a bit apprehensive about the future, I felt confident that this time I'd found the right fit. Now, the company was called Teaching.com, and I was brought in to lead on their flagship Typing.com product. And it's an online application that teaches people keyboarding skills. It has a curriculum of typing lessons to improve your speed and accuracy, and it encourages you to type ergonomically and with proper form. There's a free ad-supported version and then a paid version as well, which removes the ads and provides some additional features. Their headquarters is based in San Juan in Puerto Rico, but they are a remote-first business with a small, globally distributed team with a mix of contractors and permanent employees across North America, Europe, and East Asia, and they all work asynchronously. When it comes to their customers, their biggest user group, perhaps unsurprisingly, are students. Mostly kids in schools all over the world, spending 30 minutes on Typing.com once or twice a week to build their keyboarding fluency, from kindergarten all the way through high school. There are also accounts for teachers to track their students' progress, and admin accounts at a school and district level to handle reporting and access controls, all the sort of things you'd expect. So that's Typing.com, and it had grown organically over a number of years as a founder-led operation. And it relied on his instincts and knowledge of the market to turn a personal project that he'd really just written in his spare time into a learning tool used in tens of thousands of schools worldwide. That's a tremendous success story by anyone's standards, right? But with the founder turning his attention to building new products and competitors in this typing tutor space starting to win more market share, the Typing.com team needed dedicated product leadership for its first time in its history. And so I had a clear brief. Oh, if you think I'm too proud to make underwear jokes, you do not know me well enough. I had a clear brief. find out what typing.com needs to maintain its position as the go-to product for schools and students, and then do it. Find out what needs to be done and then make it happen. Product management in a nutshell. Now remember, I am a simple man, and for a simple man like me, a man who had spent 2 years fighting tooth and nail just to be heard, to be given the keys to an already successful product, one responsible for a large proportion of the company's revenue, no less, and to be told, we trust you to make it better, well, it was like a cool glass of beer on a hot day. Now, of course, the devil is in the detail, and there were a couple of extenuating factors that I would need to contend with, which I'll discuss in just a moment, but right there and then, I felt like I was onto something special. And I might have been tempted, with all this responsibility, to overcomplicate things. Put on my outcomes over outputs t-shirt, flex my saying no to stakeholder requests muscles, and talk in vague platitudes about strategy and vision and how roadmaps aren't very producty. But my job was to do what was necessary, not to farm likes and follows on my social media account. So in those first few days and weeks on the job, I kept my focus squarely on the 3 crucial elements of product development that I mentioned earlier. First, I need to find out what will actually make typing.com better. I need to get from where I am now as someone who's created an account and completed a few of the typing challenges to truly understanding what better looks like for our users. Once I know what better is, how am I going to deliver it? How am I going to make it happen? I need to understand how work gets done at typing.com. Will our product development process allow us to do what we want without burning out? Or will we need to make some changes? Is it in fact sustainable? And thirdly, and just as importantly as the previous 2 points, is understanding who I have on my team, what makes them tick, and what they need to buy into this journey and go on it with me. If I'm going to enjoy my work and do the best job that I can do, I need my team to be on board and hopefully enjoying themselves just as much as I am. Now, this all sounds really positive and, as I said earlier, disarmingly straightforward. So what about those extenuating factors that I mentioned? What's lurking beneath the surface here? Well, the fact is that for many of the organizations, these 3 focus areas I've just spoken about, understanding the product, getting our delivery process sorted, and looking after the well-being of our team, well, that might well be the responsibility of 3 or possibly 4 different people, right? You get your product manager, possibly in conjunction with the user researcher, if you're really lucky, to dig into the product and what problems it solves compared to its competitors and evangelize this insight across the business. You might have a delivery manager to work out how we're going to deliver that work, unblock the issues as they arise, and keep the team on track. And then you'd have maybe another person like an engineering manager to line manage the team, look after their well-being, manage performance issues, resolve conflict, handle sick leave and holiday requests, and so on. Except at typing.com, each of those jobs would have to be done by me. Now, it's not the way product social media portrays the role of product manager, but these were the gaps in the team, so if I wanted it to be successful, it's what I would have to do. Another factor was that the team itself, though staffed with highly skilled people, and looking back still some of the strongest I've ever worked with, this team was in a difficult place when I joined. Work was taking a long time, and it wasn't really clear why. Communication in the team was inconsistent, morale was low, and there was frustration among the company's leadership at not knowing what was going on. So if I was going to deliver on my mission, this was something that I was going to have to fix. And lastly, there was the minor matter of the school year. Now, this isn't something that most product people have to contend with outside of deciding when to book their summer holidays. But for typing.com, as with many other edtech products used in schools, the academic year is all important. Even small changes to a product which is used in classrooms can cause huge headaches for teachers. All their lesson plans, any extra materials they've created or activities they've prepared, any progress they've already made throughout the lessons, or any marking they've already done. If you change the software in the middle of the year, all that effort goes to waste. So, I said my approach to product management was simple, but I didn't say it was easy. Right. Let's start then by unpacking the product. What did typing.com need to become better? And how did I come to that conclusion? The idea of institutional knowledge can feel like an uncomfortably fuzzy one for product people. It reeks of bias, of groupthink, and received wisdom, skepticism of new ideas, being too close to the game, not seeing the wood for the trees. At its worst, an over-reliance on institutional knowledge can feel like being trampled to death by hippos. All the highest paid people who've been at a company the longest, handing you 700 OKRs and telling you to go do product management. Oh, I just felt a collective wincing in the room just then, which tells me I'm not alone in having experienced that pain. You have my deepest sympathies. But it doesn't have to be the case. So at typing.com, I treated institutional knowledge like a gift, like my own private focus group, whose insight I could treat like that of any well-constructed focus group. Informed, welcome, and something I can test or trust depending on the situation. I spent a long time with Fernando, typing.com's long-serving customer success specialist, combing through the thousands of requests, questions, complaints, bug reports, and letters of thanks, there were one or two, that reached his inbox every week. I spent hours in conference with Molly, a former teacher and an expert in curriculum planning and pedagogy, reviewing our lesson content and activities, examining our competitors' offerings, and exploring areas of improvement. I brought the whole team in on these conversations, sharing their experiences with typing.com as its custodians, of course, but also as parents and people with experience of using this software in the wild. Brent and Sergey, our engineers, knew every line of typing.com and could tell us exactly what was possible and what wasn't. Colin, our product designer, was an endless source of ideas and enthusiasm for ways to improve user experience. And these were all people whose experience and expertise I took seriously. And because I took them seriously, I was rewarded by the insight that, fundamentally, the software itself did not need radical change. It was the curriculum, the structure of the lessons and the activities where we had the greatest opportunity to make typing.com better. But this wasn't all. The golden rule of product management is to talk directly with your users as much as possible, to the point that it's become another one of these social media cliches I find so frustrating. If you're not talking to your users all the time, you're not doing real product management, is how they sound in my head. Though I find it interesting that all these people will tell you to talk to your users like it's the most obvious thing in the world, but so few share how they actually make that happen, which makes me suspect that maybe some of these people aren't really following their own advice. As my colleague Connor Murphy discovered in the research I mentioned earlier, quote, before starting these interviews, I would have guessed that maybe half of the product managers I would speak to talked to their users on a regular basis, and everyone told me how they felt re-energized whenever they actually go and talk to customers. But in reality, I would say it was only about 20% who did, end quote. So that's 20% of over 100 people. So here's how I approached the problem. We had no user research function in the business, you'll be shocked to hear, and no user researchers. But what we did have was integration with a research and analytics tool called Qualaroo. Some of you may have used it, other tools are available, but this is the one we had. What I then did was set up a few discrete calls to action, just little pop-ups for a percentage of the users when they logged into their accounts or completed certain actions. These calls to action invited them to speak with me about their experiences with typing.com and contained a link to a Calendly form for them to book a call in my calendar anytime in the recurring block that I'd set aside for that purpose. That was it. And by doing this, I was soon speaking with anywhere from 10 to 20 people every week, following a mixed set of closed and open questions about who they were, how they learned about typing.com, how they used it, why they used it, and what they wished they could change. Now, was this a perfectly scientific approach? No, of course it wasn't a perfectly scientific approach. I come from an academic background in the social sciences, and there are obvious methodological weaknesses here. It wouldn't have been appropriate, for example, to recruit young students to speak to through this method, so I had to focus on teachers and administrators, though I was, of course, able to ask them about their students' experiences. It's a self-selecting sample, so the people I spoke to often had strong opinions about the software, which may or may not have been representative. And some of the enterprising teachers I spoke to even used these calls to try and circumvent the usual support process and ask questions or request features directly, and I was more than happy to talk to them directly. So, it wasn't perfect. It wouldn't get published by a top-ranked scientific journal, but it was quick, it was convenient, and it was enough. I recorded the interviews in Google Meet and I transcribed them using an automated tool, and so we'd always have the raw data, but by having these conversations over and over again, each and every week, I was able to spot themes and consistencies and shared them with the team. I wrote short stories that I shared on a regular schedule, highlighting points that caught my attention. The language school in Mumbai using our product to help their students learn English. The New York tutor who'd bought Chromebooks with his own money so his students could practice at home during lockdown. The semi-retired teacher in Kalamazoo, a head teacher in fact, who had learned touch typing on manual typewriters in the 1970s and could still type at over 100 words per minute and wanted to pass these skills on to the low-income communities that she served. These stories provided incredible insight, of course, but also built a collective consciousness, what we might call enhanced institutional knowledge, about who our users were and the problems they were trying to solve. So, after all this research and discussion, I decided that the best way to make typing.com better would be to overhaul its curriculum and student experience. Rather than this single curriculum for all ages, which they'd had previously, the lessons would be mapped to US grading standards, which are widely used internationally. Students assigned to higher grades would have more challenging lessons with more sophisticated content linked to some of the other subjects they were also studying, like history and English. And those assigned to lower grades would have lessons appropriate to their level, but also including wider digital literacy, dealing with cyberbullying and staying safe online, all topics that teachers had told us were really important to them and they were struggling to teach on their own. This would require the creation of multiple new lesson types with thousands of lines of additional content, of course, massive UX changes across student, teacher, and admin views, all of which would need to be tested. New multimedia content would need to be created, marketing and promotional material, and about 100 other things that all go into such an enormous project. And yes, it was a project. It was a collective endeavor involving multiple strands of work with numerous interconnecting dependencies, risks, and requirements, and it needed to be completed by a set date. That's a project, no matter how empowered the team is, and it was my job to manage it. Some might even say project manage it, so that when the new school year starts, all our users get the benefits of our hard work. Now, is this the job of a product manager in the purest sense of the word? Possibly not. I once spoke proudly about this entire piece of work in an interview, a job interview with a well-known company that I won't say here, but if you want to ask me afterwards, I will happily spill the beans. And I was told in no uncertain terms by them that it wasn't producty enough to impress them. But still, it needed doing, and it was my responsibility to make sure that it happened, so I did it. Typing.com had, about a year or so before I joined, gone all in on Basecamp as their tool of choice. They used it for company announcements, planning and product development, of course, social activities, inter-team communication, the lot. And as well as going all in on Basecamp, they had settled on ShapeUp as their product development methodology. Both sensible choices, they fit together, and they've got a lot to commend them. But as I mentioned earlier, there were some problems that needed fixing. Despite a deliberate choice of tools and methodology, work had often been slower to complete than expected, communication had been patchy, and the business leadership had felt frustrated and not being kept in the loop. And this was a small founder-led organization, remember, and if you've ever had experiences of those kinds of organizations, the leaders at companies like these find it hard at best to relinquish control, let alone if they feel like they don't know what's going on. So I couldn't afford to let these issues continue. So, after talking with the team and the company's leadership about what they'd experienced, my assessment was there wasn't actually anything inherently wrong with the tools that they were using or the methodology that they'd picked. I'd even noticed during my own recruitment how much emphasis they'd placed on communication style, showing a willingness to speak up and talk directly about the elephant in the room. So clearly the people at this company wanted to work in a particular way and they had the skills to do it. They'd recruited for it. But they'd fallen victim to the classic trap of starting out doing things deliberately, by making conscious decisions to work according to their plan, to follow their communication policy, to take that aspirational goal of how they wanted to work and execute on all the little things needed to make that vision a reality. They'd started out by doing all of these things, but over time, they let it slip, little by little. The discipline needed to work and communicate with rigor had fallen away. So I asked for a commitment from the team and from the business leadership. We weren't just going to revamp Typing.com's curriculum. We were going to be deliberate, consistent, and methodical about how we worked and communicated. There was nothing new here, nothing they were unfamiliar with, nothing they should have been scared of. But we were going to do it each and every day, and we were going to hold each other accountable for working together in the way that they'd always wanted. High performance, strong communication, collaborative culture, these aren't things that you are, they are things that you do. They are actions. And if we wanted to be a team that could deliver ambitious changes like the ones I was proposing, then we needed to commit to doing what was necessary. And that might sound a bit ominous to do what was necessary. But there were two reasons why I got the commitment that I was asking for. And the first is that I wasn't actually asking for anything arduous or difficult. Short weekly demo videos from everyone sharing their work in progress, explanatory screenshots and further short videos attached to each piece of work, using Basecamp's built-in functionality to show whether the work was in the working it out stage or in the doing it stage, and mobbing on problems that weren't moving, tagging named individuals to ask for specific particular feedback, building work in slices of functionality rather than layers. None of these things is hard. It's doing it consistently, each and every day, making that decision to do the thing that needs doing. That's the hard bit. And by keeping each other accountable, we could make that happen. The other reason why my team was able to give the commitment that they did was that I gave a promise too. My promise was that not only was I asking for things that weren't difficult, but that in taking the steps, the work would actually become easier. Work is hard when you've got too much to do in too little time. It's hard when you don't know what you're meant to be doing, and it's hard when you're not on the same page as all your colleagues. Doing these things consistently, while demanding, enabled us to remove nearly all of those bits of the process that make work stressful and unsustainable. And along with this behavioral commitment, the first thing I did was put a great big date on the plan. And somewhere in the Justice League headquarters of product thinking, an alarm has just gone off. But look, I understand all the arguments about arbitrary dates in product development, and I agree with most of them. But there are two reasons why this was absolutely necessary, and if I was asked to replay this decision 100 times, I'd do it 100 times over again. The first is that this date wasn't actually arbitrary. I spoke earlier about the importance of the school year cycle, and it was vital that the overhauled version of typing.com was ready to go before the end of the summer holidays. If we missed that cutoff point, we couldn't just push the launch back a month or two without causing chaos in all the schools worldwide that relied on our product. It would have to wait until the following summer to release it. That would be absolutely unacceptable. And the second reason, and the reason why I think product managers should, occasionally at least, consider the use of dates in their work, is to do with appetite. I use dates in this roadmap not to mark some arbitrary checkpoints which the business could use to squeeze more features from an overworked product team or punish those product managers not savvy enough to game the system. I use dates to demonstrate our appetite for the work which needed to be done, to demonstrate the maximum time we wanted to spend. Everyone, I don't care where you work, everyone is terrible at estimating the size of work. Everyone's terrible at it. If you did it well once, congratulations, you were lucky. Everyone's bad at it. I will die on this hill. It invites pressure from the organization's leadership to do more with less. And after 8 months of hard graft, everyone ends up pissed off and burnt out. And I don't know about you, but that's not my idea of a good time. So, by collectively asking how much time do we want to invest on this feature, not how long do we think it'll take, how long do we want to invest on it, this gave us a starting point for at least some sensible discussions about the scope of what we were trying to do. And we could say, for example, we want to spend no more than 6 weeks on the teacher portal, because we knew that with all the communication practices I've already spoken about, this would mean that we'd know pretty soon after we'd started whether our scope was actually feasible or not, and what implications that would have for the rest of the work, and we could trim scope if needed. Talking about appetite lowers the temperature and helps keep product development sustainable. So, I've talked about making the product better, and I've talked about making the process sustainable, two absolutely critical aspects of how I approach product development. But what about the people? What about making sure they, and most importantly, I'm enjoying the experience as much as possible? I said earlier that this is the bit I find most important, that it's the fuel of the virtuous cycle of building good products, and that's absolutely true. I believe this. But in some ways, though, it's also the trickiest to explain how to do well. Because there are some things which are just good ideas, right, regardless of the circumstances. Ever since the remote working boom during lockdown, I've seen any number of questions from people asking how to build a sense of camaraderie when you're not co-located, as if co-location is some sort of magic lamp. And then there's all the usual suggestions of team-building activities, playing on GeoGuessr, doing home cookery classes and things, and they're not bad ideas. In fact, I've sometimes seen them done quite well. There's a 15-minute quiz we do at Citizens Advice every Friday afternoon, and it's often the best part of my week. Although maybe that says something about me and my competitiveness, I don't know. My absolute favorite idea, though, was one that was already in place at typing.com when I joined, so I can't take credit for inventing it, but I am definitely going to take credit with sharing it all with you here today, and if I see it start popping up in blog posts and social media in the future, I'll know where it came from. And this was the monthly meal adventure. Every month, everyone on the team could expense $50 towards a meal. It could be at a restaurant, it could be at a takeaway, it could be the ingredients for a meal which you make at home. It doesn't matter. The only caveat was that you needed to take a photograph of the meal and post about it for the rest of the team to see. So there, you can have that one for free. I absolutely love this idea. It gave me a point of connection with my team that I might not otherwise have had. And $50 felt about right too. It's large enough to feel special, like you can treat yourself, but not so much that I'd have rather had the money. It was a token of appreciation and of shared humanity, both fundamental in the nurturing of strong relationships. And I demonstrated this in other ways too throughout the course of the project. During my line management conversations with the team, I'd learned about some of their interests and their habits and what their favourite drinks were. Some liked wine, some preferred rum or bourbon or a fine scotch. And when we reached a particularly significant milestone, I bought everyone's favourites with my own money and had them shipped to their homes as a surprise. Now, the logistics of shipping alcohol to different parts of North America wasn't something I'd expected to learn during my tenure, but life often provides us with these little opportunities to learn something new. And for one of my team who didn't drink, but who did have a young family, I opted to send Amazon vouchers that he could use on whatever he wanted, along with a hamper for a business that was local to them. And this, again, seemed like a very sensible option, but again, perhaps showed my naivety a little bit. In today's globalized world, I'd never expected that I'd actually need to create a Mexican Amazon account and then make the purchase in Spanish. My Spanish is not good. Again, one of life's little lessons. But the most significant and impactful thing that I did was listen to my team, be generous with my time, and treat them as both experts with skin in the game and as humans with their own hopes and dreams. The culture of the team when I joined was already strong on feedback. Radical candor had been a staple for typing.com for a long time, with openness and honesty on all work matters an absolute non-negotiable. And I found this a refreshing change from previous environments where feedback could often be indirect, non-specific, or delivered only at an end-of-year review when you'd suddenly learn about a mistake you made 7 months ago. But while timely, direct feedback is a definite plus. And again, we heard about this at Spotify. It could start to take its toll without counterbalancing it with warmth and humanity. It is necessary to be told with no ambiguity when and how your work isn't hitting the mark, but I made a particular effort to ensure my team knew that I was rooting for them, that I believed in them, and that while we'd all committed to high standards, I would never be unreasonable or take them for granted. In fact, as the resident European on the team working with primarily North Americans, my expectations of normal working practice gave me a huge advantage in demonstrating my appreciation and trust. Typing.com had an unlimited time-off policy, and I made it entirely clear that I'd be following European vacation norms and expected my team to do so as well. This instantly doubled the amount of vacation time most of my team were taking. When one of my team requested leave to take a family camping trip, it might have been the first time he'd ever done so while leaving his phone switched off and his laptop at home. And when another team member told me they were having difficulties arranging regular childcare at the start of the month, I told them to take the first weekday of each month off as a standing item, with permission to take additional days or half days whenever they needed. They had an unlimited time off policy, and I encouraged them to use it. Building trust, building a team, getting to a place where you can enjoy your work and the company of your colleagues, even in a remote, asynchronous company across multiple time zones. It's not rocket science. I mean, having an accent like mine does a lot of the heavy lifting in the US, I'm not going to lie about that, but you don't need gimmicks. The real secret is to prove you give a shit. So, after all that, what happened? Did I make typing.com better? Did I do it sustainably? And did I enjoy myself along the way? Well, my team completely transformed the learning experience of over 40 million students, teachers, and school administrators in under 8 months. We saw students thriving in our new curriculum, delighted with the fun new activities that complemented what they were learning in their other classes. Teachers were thrilled at this renewed enthusiasm from their pupils, and the integration of digital literacy and online safety lessons into the program solved a real problem for them. And administrators, the people who hold the purse strings for schools and district budgets, started seeing typing.com licenses as not simply a nice to have, but as a truly valuable investment for their institutions. typing.com was unequivocally better. But there was every possibility that this project could have gone wrong. There was an enormous amount of work to do, any number of dependencies both in and out of our control, and there were times when we had to trim the scope of our ambition. But not only did we hit our target release date, we did so with an almost unsettling level of calm. Project workload was steady, it was deliberate and manageable. Because we'd built our work plan around our appetites rather than estimations, we were able to have sensible conversations about the trade-offs involved in investing more time on feature A as opposed to feature B, or moving on to other aspects of the project. Because we'd committed to building in slices of functionality rather than building a back end and then trying to build a front end separately, we were able to review and give feedback on cohesive pieces of work from the perspective of an end user. And because we'd built the discipline of consistently sharing those short video updates, making specific asks of named individuals, mobbing on problems to get from working it out to doing it, we were able to avoid nasty surprises. This was the smoothest project of this size and scope that I've ever delivered. I'm not sure I will ever do it again. As for how enjoyable it was, well, to this day, I look back on this period of my life with great fondness. I feel truly privileged to have worked with such amazing human beings. They were great professionals and truly lovely people. Also, did I mention that this accent does a lot to break the ice with North American colleagues? And if calls ever started to get a little bit tense, I could just dial up my Welshness a bit, you see. And that reaction would completely diffuse the situation. The reaction was always an absolute joy. If there's one truism about product management that I can actually get behind, it's that product people love a three-part list. And so I want to end this talk. Yes, they do. So I want to end this talk with 3 lessons that I learned from teaching the world to type. The first lesson is that in product work, you don't get bonus points for style. Your job is to be effective, to use whatever tools you have available to make that happen. By all means, go to the gym at 5 a.m. if you really must. But don't measure yourself against the impossible standards of what you think other product people are doing, because, to return to Colin Murphy's research for a moment, quote, if you try to ship fast and have at least one way of measuring your impact, you are already in the top 10% of product teams, end quote. The second lesson is that environment is the most important factor in your success or failure in any given role. I succeeded in typing.com because the environment was right for me. It might not have been right for someone else, but it was right for me. My expertise was valued, and I was trusted to do what I felt was right. I was given the freedom to make my own choices, but I was held accountable for those calls. The team was small and responded to my more personal approach. But in large organizations, I tend to get frustrated. When I've worked in low-trust environments, I've sometimes been described as a little bit of a troublemaker, though not often to my face. But in the right environment, with the right people around me, all that friction just seemed to melt away. And if you're struggling and doubting whether you've got the skills to be successful in product, as I was at times in my career, and some of my clients, my people I coach, often describe this problem. If you're struggling and you're doubting yourself, don't give up on yourself. Find the right environment, and you can watch yourself flourish. And the third, and the final lesson. I spoke at the start of this talk about my unease with product roles that appear to be narrowing, becoming more specialized, emphasizing oddly specific domain knowledge over actual product skills. And I described my despair at the cargo cult wisdom of product social media, parroting sound bites to each other, declaiming what product management is and what it isn't. But in my experience with typing.com, I remembered a lesson from nearly 20 years ago, when Ken Norton told the world that product managers bring the donuts. That's what makes us effective, doing what needs to be done, whatever it is, not because it's written down somewhere or fits neatly into a 2x2 grid, but because if you don't do it, nobody else will. The world will turn again in time, and companies will remember the importance of people who do the job that's in front of them. In the meantime, though, keep bringing the donuts. Thank you very much, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you.